Outtakes, Monica here, and welcome to my channel, and I really hope you're all staying safe and healthy. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to make this super simple crop top, which can actually be worn two different ways. You can wear it as a halter top like I have it here, or you can tie these ties into a bow and have just a really simple strapless crop top, so it's very versatile and really quick to make too. And make sure to stay tuned because in one of my next sewing tutorials, I'm going to show you how to turn this into an off-the-shoulder crop top. So if you like that little bit of extra coverage that an off-the-shoulder top provides, then you'll be able to do that with this exact same bodice. So I can't wait to show you that too. I really hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and if you do, please give the video a thumbs up, and I would love to have you subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, because we have a super fun sewing community on here, and it'd be so nice to have you be a part of it. And what are we waiting for? Let's go ahead and get sewing. For this project, you're going to need up to a yard of a stretch knit fabric, and it does need to stretch so that you get that great comfortable fit easily and so you can get the top on and off over your head, which is obviously important. I wound up using about 3/4 of a yard for my top, but I do suggest getting a yard just to be on the safe side. You'll also need a fitted tank top to use as a template, plus the sewing supplies I have listed in the video's description, so make sure to check that out before you start so you have everything you need. To begin, decide where on your tank top you want your new crop top to end, and fold the fabric below that point up out of the way so that your tank top now looks like a crop top. Then fold the straps down too so they're no longer visible, and you've created a straight edge along the top of the shirt. Pin the straps down so they stay in place, and flip the tank top over so that you've got almost a rectangular shape, and this will give us a basic guide on how big to cut out our new shirt without having to measure, so we keep it nice and simple. Fold a portion of your fabric over a little wider than the tank top and smooth it out, and make sure that your fabric stretches the most in the direction the arrows are going so that the crop top will be most stretchy going around you once it's done. Lay the tank top onto the fabric so that one of its sides lines up with the fold of the fabric, and if your tank top curves inward a little bit like mine does, that's not a problem. Just line up the outermost edges of the tank top with the fold of the fabric like I have here. Pin it into place and begin cutting a 1/2 inch above the top edge, which adds the room we need for seam allowance. Then when you get to the side, cut 1 inch wider than the shirt this time, and if your shirt is curved inward like mine, make sure to cut down in a straight line rather than a curve. And finally, cut a 1/2 inch lower than the bottom edge. Remove the tank top and unfold the fabric and you'll have a long rectangle cut out, then cut out a second identical rectangle. Lay them together with the correct sides of the fabrics facing together and pin and sew along the top and bottom edges using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Since we're sewing stretch fabric, use a ballpoint needle and sew all your seams with either a stretch stitch or a zigzag stitch, either of which will allow your seams to stretch without breaking. I always like to test a few stretch and zigzag stitches on a scrap seam of my fabric to see what works best, because sometimes one stitch may work better than another on different stretch fabrics. A zigzag stitch worked well on mine, so that's what I used. And if you've tried several stitches and you have a problem with your seams looking wavy, which can happen once in a while on stretch fabric, I suggest trying a walking foot, which can really help your seams sew much more smoothly. When you're done sewing, turn your rectangle right side out, and I like to press it with an iron so that the seams are nice and neat. Fold your rectangle in half and pin and sew along the short edge, but this time you'll need to use 1 inch seam allowance when you sew. Try it on to make sure it fits you snugly, and then rotate the top so that the seam is positioned in the center. Open up and flatten out the seam allowance. Then sew a row of stitches about a 1/2 inch away from that center seam on both sides, which will create a casing or tube for the ties to go through. And when you do this, make sure you're only sewing through the seam allowance and top layer of fabric and not through the other side of the shirt. You'll still need to use a stretch or a zigzag stitch for this, but this time, since the stitches are going to be visible on the outside of the shirt, I decided to use a more decorative looking stretch stitch just to add a nice detail. When you finish sewing along both sides, you'll have created casings on either side of that seam, and this is what it'll look like turned right side out. Set it aside and cut out a long strip of fabric for your ties that measures about 55 inches long by 2 inches wide. You can trim this down later if it's too long, but I like cutting it plenty long for now just to be on the safe side. Fold the fabric in half with correct sides together and pin it together all the way along the length of the tie. When you finish pinning, sew the edge together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance and the same stitch you used on your seams earlier, and then trim the seam allowance down to about a 1/4 inch so it's not as bulky. Hook a safety pin on one end and use it to turn the tie right side out by feeding the pin all the way through the fabric. It'll take a minute to do this, but when you pull it out of the other side, you'll turn the fabric right side out and you'll have a nice neat tie. Use the safety pin again to feed the tie up through one side of the casing and then bring it back down through the opposite side. You'll then be able to use the ties to gather and scrunch the fabric as much as you'd like to create a ruched effect, and you can tie the ties into a bow or a halter top. Decide how long you want the ties to be and then finish their edges either by double folding them and sewing them down or just tying the ends into a knot, and now your top is ready to wear. Thank you for watching and happy sewing! Thought I was recording this whole time and I wasn't. I'm just standing there like, don't even have the record going. Really, I hope that was just like water dripping and not bird poop, because I definitely saw something fall out of the corner of my eye. Thank goodness it wasn't right here. And we finally started seeing hummingbirds the other day, so I'm going to try and get a picture of one today if I can, if I see it while I'm out here. So fingers crossed. Hummingbird. I just heard it.